Good morning, Peace United Church of Christ. I look forward to participating with you in communion following our worship service this morning and during our Zoom time. My sermon title for today is Regaining Our Souls from Luke 25. Hear Jesus' words once again. You will be betrayed even by parents and brothers, by relatives and friends, and they will put some of you to death. By your endurance, you will gain your souls. The deep divisions of this nation run not only along racial lines, but also through our families, our friends, sometimes even our churches. We have competing visions of God's call upon our lives. We have competing visions of an America that works for all of her citizens. We have competing visions of morality. In Isaiah's moral imagination, often described as the peaceable kingdom, he envisions a new heaven and a new earth. He looks to the day when laborers will build their own houses, dig their own gardens, and the wolf and the lamb will feed together. Who actually does the house building, the yard work, in the cities of Hickory or Newton or Charlotte? Primarily low-wage immigrants and semi-skilled laborers of all colors. Do most of them own their own home? Have the acreage to plant a garden, a vineyard? Is there a time when the aggressor and the helpless eat together? Isaiah envisions a day of peace, fullness, and equity. Can that dream exist in today's America? In stark contrast with Isaiah's ironic vision is Jesus' assertion of wars, persecutions, arrests, and insurrection. That sounds more like today's reality. On the 25th of May, America and the world watched as George Floyd cried out, "I can't breathe," while a police officer knelt on his neck. Just a few days ago, on Friday, June 5th, we see 75-year-old protester Martin Gugino approach officers in Buffalo, New York, only to be pushed aggressively to the ground with a head injury as the officers march past. It's a startling vision of police elevating a directive above a human life. Carl Sandburg once wrote, "The single clenched fist, lifted and ready, or the open hand held out and waiting. Choose, for we meet by one or the other." Protesters, even in towns as small as Newton, are giving evidence of choosing more diverse meetings with open hands and arms. Even as the old guard of civil rights leaders have stayed home for health reasons, a new generation are choosing to challenge the racism that has shaped America since her founding days. By what endurance, resolve of hope, can we begin to shift our own truth so that it is wider and more welcoming? It can begin by looking beyond the labels and seeing those whom we so readily other, whether police or protester, as beloved children of God, worthy of our love. Our United Church of Christ Board of Directors has just challenged us not to remain silent during this time, saying God created and loves people of every color, and yet We create economic, political, and social barriers that oppress African Americans in every sector, from housing and education to health care and criminal justice. Let me remind us all of a few of the ways our racism shows up in our criminal justice system. While white people are more likely to have used illegal drugs, they are far less likely to go to jail for those crimes than are people of color. Black men are sentenced to far lengthier prison sentences than their white counterparts committing the same crime. White people, which would include police officers, see black children as older and less innocent than other kids their same age, leading to expectations of more maturity than is manifest by the child, which then becomes the reality that black children are more likely to be tried as adults in the criminal justice system, which then leads to their incarceration in prisons rather than in juvenile justice centers. Facing the truth in all its stark reality matters. Things will not get better by themselves. It takes our concerted efforts to bend that moral arc toward justice. Rebecca Solnit writes, "It's important to emphasize that hope is only a beginning. It's not a substitute for action, only a basis for it. We have the power to help change the systems in the world around us. We must demand better policing. We must also demand fairer sentencing laws and recognize the ways in which simply locking people up does not improve our society. Sympathy and understanding are not enough. By your endurance, you will gain your soul." John Lewis, Georgia congressman and civil rights activist, was shaped and formed in a family of faith who knew what it meant to endure and to build hope. As a child, Lewis went to visit his Aunt Seneva, who lived in the shambles of a shotgun house, as he described it. When the rains came, she had to put out buckets and pans to catch the water that dripped through the tin roof. One day, while Lewis and his siblings were playing with his cousins at his aunt's home, a storm blew in. Seneva called for all the children. He says he can't remember if it was 12 or 15 little ones to come inside. As the storm intensified, so did his aunt's fears. She had the children hold hands. They prayed and they cried, because when Aunt Seneca began to cry, they all cried. The storms blew so powerfully that they began to lift a corner of the house off its foundation. His aunt had them all run toward that corner to hold the house down. When the wind shifted and another side of the house was at risk, she walked them to that corner. Lewis says we were 15 children walking with the wind, holding that trembling house down with the weight of our small bodies. Endurance builds in unusual ways. Lewis continues, "More than half a century has passed since that day, and it has struck me more than once that our society is not unlike the children in that house, rocked again and again by the winds of one storm or another, the walls around us seeming at times as if they might fly apart. We need the weight of our smallest children, our oldest somebodies, our singers and preachers and teachers and artists and business leaders and protesters to move toward the corner that is the weakest, and with endurance resist the winds, the storms sure to come. What is the work of endurance, of hope, to which Peace United Church of Christ is called? How will we lift up the brokenhearted, free the oppressed, partner across lines of politics, privilege, and power through a love-fueled endurance? I close with Martin Luther King Jr.'s reminder: far from being the pious injunction of a utopian dreamer, the command to love one's enemies is an absolute necessity for the survival of our civilization. Yes, it is love that will save our world and our civilization, love even for our enemies. So together, let us sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us, and march on till victory is won. Amen.